Welcome to Untitled Tarot. My name is Brian Griffin. Today's video, my deck collection, Last Century, is a response to a video by Martin Tarot in the City. I will link to his video in below section. These are decks that I purchased before I moved to Ohio in 1996. So here we go. My first deck, the first deck I purchased, and this deck I use exclusively for my own readings, is a Morgan Greer. And this is one that was done by Morgan Press, although U.S. Games took over distribution. And the way you can tell this is a Morgan Press is that the card is actually about an eighth of an inch wider. U.S. Games. Again, it's the same artwork, it's just a slightly narrower card. So this is the first deck. I purchased it in 1980. I had been aware of tarot sort of as a theory more than anything else. I don't recall the family ever having a problem with it. It was just something that was around. And then the person I met and had a long-term relationship in 1980 showed me his. He had a yellow box. And I respect Pixie's artwork and the importance it is in tarot history, but it didn't connect with me. So I went to the occult shop, owned then by the Wiccan Church of Canada. I don't know if it still is. And looked at their selection and picked up that one, the Morgan Greer. The second deck I purchased, shipped in this box. It is a limited edition, signed and numbered, major arcana only, with gold foil edging of a deck that later became mass market. This is the Sacred Rose Tarot. Again, this is the major only limited edition. The card for it might have been tucked away. Oh, there we are. Number 439 by Johanna Giglio Sherman. So I love the artwork. It is was a difficult one for me to learn on because it doesn't have as much of the symbols that the people expect in the Rider-Waite, and the Morgan Greer did tend to have most of it. But it did introduce me to a variety of artwork. So that was the next deck. I also bought the Aquarian Tarot. I don't have it to show you because I rehomed it a few years ago. I never connected with it. Did a couple of readings with it, never really connected. I did bring it down to the States with me, but it did in the last few years find its way to someone who loves the artwork of the period and who can truly appreciate the deck. I also bought a second copy of the Morgan Greer, and see, distributed by Morgan and Morgan. So again, it's the old Morgan Press. It's the second copy. This is what I have until recently been my only deck for client reading. So that's the other Morgan Greer. This is the Medieval Scapini. You will notice that all of these first 5 decks are U.S. Games. That was pretty much the product selection available back in the 80s, at least in Toronto. So again, you can see that it has U.S. Games in New York. And this was the first printing of the guidebook. I don't have any of the tech boxes. Back in those days, tech boxes were not really used. Most people put their decks in cloth or in bags, wrap them in a piece of leather, etc. And when you only have half a dozen decks, obviously it's a little easier to tell them apart. So this is the Medieval Scapini. Now, it is a very interesting deck, and it's sort of pippish and historic, and it is a gorgeous deck. It is not one that I have ever connected with, and so it actually is looking to be rehomed. Although it is an older copy, as I said, I got it in the early 80s, and you can see the guidebook still has U.S. Games in New York. It's not truly a collector's edition since the deck is still published. I don't have the tuck box, etc. But it is looking for someone who will properly appreciate it. On my personal blog, I do have a list of all the decks I have looking to be rehomed, and I will add that to the comments as well. So those are the first 5 decks. I got all of those, as I said, in the 1980s. They were all U.S. Games publications, and that was my foundation. I did, shortly before I moved to Ohio, receive as a gift a deck called the Uranian. It's a majors only. As you can see, it's cards, regular cardstock. It was perforated, put together at a large sheet as an insert to a bear magazine, not referring to woodland, well, perhaps woodland creatures, but human bears as opposed to Yogi Bear. So I can't show you many of the cards because they are adult material, but there are some. I have a new home for this. When I move back to Canada, I have someone who will take it. It is a connection indirectly to my sisterhood and the radical fairy movement, since the deck was created by Randy Esslinger is the artist. This was the last artwork he did before he passed. So again, it's the majors only. So that I did receive as my only non-US Games tarot before I moved here. I also brought with me 3 non-tarot oracle decks. Again, no original packaging because we didn't save them back in those days. I have 2 decks that were created by or co-created by Jamie Sams. All 3 of these decks do feature Aboriginal traditions, or what we in Canada call First Nations traditions. This is the Sacred Path Oracle deck, and I use this and the next deck either separately or sometimes together. They have the same card size, and this has been, I believe, reissued by somebody else. Jamie Sands and Linda Childers. I'm trying to remember. I can't remember off the top of my head the publishing company, but it was, I believe, one of the bigger ones. The other deck, very similar, very related, same, as I said, same size cards, and also with Jamie Sands, called Medicine Cards. This is the first edition put out by Bear and Company in Santa Fe, New Mexico. The deck has since been acquired by one of the mainstream publishers. I believe US Games distributes. And the only real difference is that in the original deck, as I've got here, there are included 8 blank shield cards so that we could customize with an animal, a totem animal, if you will, of personal significance. This did come with a hardcover book, which I forgot to pull out. Mine has a green cover. I believe purple is the cover of the current edition. So those 2 decks are the same size cards, created or co-created by one of the same people, and I'm very happy with them. The third Aboriginal First Nations inspired deck that I got was the Lakota Sweat Lodge cards, and they're very interesting cards. I've not bonded with them, and arguably they're looking for a home. However, the time has not been kind to the card stock. As you can see, there's a bit of a warp, which is a shame because the card artwork is very interesting. The book, which comes with it, or did come with it as a set, is fairly comprehensive, and there's nothing wrong with it. I just didn't click with it, and like I said, now it's arguably looking for a home, although it has to be someone who understands the ravages of age, as so many of us are feeling. So that was the Lakota Sweat Lodge cards. So those were the decks that I acquired last century. And I do have a few other items to show that are connected to those items, directly or indirectly. The Sacred Rose Tarot Limited Edition, Measures Only, was published in 1980 by U.S. Games. And in 1982, they published the Complete Tarot. I do have it, but I did not acquire it until this century. So it was not in my possession last century, but it sort of, as I said, relates to the deck. And I also have, since acquiring this full deck, acquired this Guide to the Sacred Rose Tarot. It's an excellent book. It's out of print. U.S. Games has not indicated that they will ever reprint it, which is a shame. I consider myself fortunate to have acquired this used copy in fairly good condition for less than $30 US. That's not often a pricing that you will see on it. Johanna talks about the cards, but also about a variety of archetypes and connections, color coordination, etc. So it's a wonderful book, and you can certainly get lost in it. So that ties back to the Major Arcana. Another book which I acquired back in the 80s was this, and this is an early edition. I know they have since reprinted it. I believe Simon of the Hermit's Cave has it as like an 8 by 10 inch full-size book. So I got this, the deck that was used to illustrate it, the one shown on the cover and throughout in line drawing, was a limited edition, out of print by the time I acquired the book. And honestly, I'm not sure I would have purchased it. The artwork, again, in a lot of ways, very much more simple than the Rider-Waite deck. However, it has been republished by Sheridan Douglas, I think Sheridan Douglas Press. Anyway, so I did acquire it this century. And it's interesting because this sort of block color is exactly why I did not like the RWS yellow box that Isaac had when I first looked at it. And again, fairly simple in a lot of ways. Respecting the history of this deck, and Sheridan was the artist and Douglas the author. So again, not from that time period. It's not in my possession at that time period, but sort of an honorable mention sort of thing. So there you have it. That is my deck collection last century. I hope you found it interesting.